that is actually much more recent than that. Let's just say that Steve and I were having a conversation this past week where, we've worked together for so long that I will infer his silences to mean things. And I was drawing like these inferences from his silences and was spending like 4 minutes talking to what was actually a dead phone.
It's like, no, you're right. That's not me.
No, that's exactly what it is. It's like, but what if we do this? Oh, you know what? You're right. I appreciate that. That's tough feedback, but I appreciate that. That would not have worked. I had not thought of it that way. And then the really embarrassing thing is, are we recording this? I assume we are.
Yeah, I just started the recording.
So the truly, and I try to like break the ice a little bit with like, hey, A's won though, and I get like nothing, and I'm like, whew, okay, all right, we gotta work out of this one, and then finally I'm like, talk to me, Goose, and that was when I got nothing out of that. I'm like, wait a minute, hello, and I'm like, how long has the phone been dead? It was embarrassing.
That's wonderful.
Steve, you figured it out.
Yeah, I figured it out. I had to go allow Twitter Spaces to listen to my device at all hours of all days.
There you go. Yeah, just have to allow Twitter Spaces to listen to your microphone so it can tailor ads for you, obviously.
It's a fair bargain.
I already have enough hot mic ads hitting my phone. What's another one?
It's trying to serve you. Have you listened to the reply all on is the Facebook microphone on?
No.
It
sounds terrifying.
No, it's excellent. We'll link to it in the show notes. So they, because there's this like very strong anecdotal evidence that the Facebook mics are on, that Facebook has the mic on, and Facebook ardently denies that they use the mic. And the truth is actually, in some ways, even scarier in that Facebook actually doesn't need the mic to be on to read your mind. Because the Facebook mics that are hot are all of the people in your network that are experiencing the same things that you're experiencing. So in other words, you may have a conversation with somebody, and then all of a sudden you get an ad for something that you have not typed into your phone at all, but that you were talking about. And it's because the other person did something that Facebook recognized and then fed that ad to you. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure on top of the analytics they can pull, they're also just direct listening to you. So,
okay,
why not do both? Right. You can do both.
Right. Well, you're thinking I'm overthinking it. Well, it's a good reply all opposite, so it's worth listening to.
You're going to start getting ads for tinfoil hats, Steve.
Well, funny you should say that.
All right, so we had this one in the queue for a little while to talk about Silicon Cowboys, which Adam, I assume I put you on to Silicon Cowboys. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, yes.
And Steve, I know I put you on to Silicon Cowboys.
I thought I put you onto it. No, you very much did. You recommended it, and it was a great recommendation. And
so the history here is that actually I was trying to watch *Halt and Catch Fire* with my 13-year-old. And I don't know if folks watch *Halt and Catch Fire*, but I'm like, I would like to watch this. It's effectively about Compaq, loosely based on Compaq. As it turns out, as my 13-year-old observed, it's like, Dad, is there this much sex in computers? I'm like, no, not really. This is like, there's a lot of spontaneous sex breaking out here. This is really not and they got to the point where it's like, again, he's not, he sadly is a child of the internet, so really nothing can faze him. But he did just find it like boring that there was he's like, Dad, can we just like watch something that doesn't have as much sex in it? I'm like, all right. So this is how I found Silicon Cowboys. And then I think I can't remember the ordering, but I turned both of you onto it. And yeah, what'd you think of the documentary?
It was amazing. A little bit disappointed in myself that I knew as little about Compaq and their rise as I did, which, I mean, also made the documentary that much more enjoyable because they do a very good job of narrating the story and giving it some Hollywood vibe, but it was fascinating. I mean, I at the time that they launched, I was 4 years old, so appreciating that I wouldn't have tracked it at that time, but still, fastest company to $100 million, fastest company to $1 billion, fastest company to the Fortune 500. I mean, just their meteoric rise was, I was kind of surprised it was off my radar.
Yeah, likewise. I'm embarrassed that I had no idea of what a story it was because, like in the I don't know, growing up, sort of Compaq was interchangeable with like Gateway Computer or whatever, just sort of gray box. And then into my adulthood, it was like literally a punchline, right? Like it had so little cachet that it was, culminating in Scott McNeely's great line of the sound of two garbage trucks colliding
Right.
when HP and but that for me that was Compact. So then to see it portrayed in this light of this unbelievable success story, but truly driven by this combination of market and technology and execution. It was eye-opening.
Oh, they hit the trifecta for sure. And so just to give everyone some idea of the numbers, first of all, actually, it's ironic you should mention Gateway, Adam, because they are actually incorporated as Gateway technology. So I
saw that. That was crazy. Obviously, no relation.
No relation to like cow-based Gateway. That's on February 16th, 1982. On December 31st, 1983, their sales are 111 million. On December 31st, 1984, 329 million. On December 31st, 1985, 503 million. And those are not real dollars. Those are nominal dollars. Those are in 1983, 1984, and 1985 dollars. And coming out of a deep depression in 1982, I mean, those numbers are just insane. I mean, it's just nuts.
And they did, I think they said, so that first year they sold something like 50,000 PCs. And this was, I thought the other part that was fascinating was just thinking back about how difficult it would have been to raise money at that time. And then how difficult it would have been to raise money on the premise of building a computer company that was going to go after IBM.
Yeah,
was even more laughable.
And what they raised 750,000, which in today's terms, I did the math, was like 2.1 million. 2.1 million. It's crazy.
It's crazy. And so have either of you read Open by the
No.
Okay.
No.
So I think it is worth reading the book. I think the book, as sadly, is misnamed. I don't know, why would you call it Open? Which to me is not what I associate that with, much more with Sun than with Compact. It should have been named Compatible, which is much more Compact's zeitgeist. But anyway.
And quality.
Yeah, right. Misnamed, great book. Goes into the fundraising quite a bit. And Steve, at the risk of limiting both of our careers,
oh boy,
I feel that like the singular Pierre Lamond serves on Oxide's board, and he told us a story that I feel is safe to retell.
I'm glad you do.
Okay, so I will be retelling this alone, and Steve will apparently be throwing me under the bus. Which is fine.
It's a safe story.
I think it's a safe story, right?
Yeah.
So Pierre describes, and he does not feature in Open, so I'm not sure. So Pierre's at Sequoia at the time, and apparently flies to Houston to meet with Compaq as part of their raise. Now, based on the book, I think this can't be their initial raise. So February 22nd, they raised 1.5 million. I think this has got to be, they raise 8.5 in September of 82. And I think it's got to be a part of that raise. He flies into Houston, and Steve, correct me if I'm misremembering this, if you dare correct me, if you're just going to let me just twist out here in the wind. But they hit wind shear in Houston, and Pierre describes the experience as terrifying. I mean, correct me again if I'm getting his description of that incorrect. Pierre,
definitely worst storm he had ever been in.
Right. Pierre is, so one should know, 90 years old, grew up in Nazi-occupied Paris. Pierre does not scare easily, as we saw during the pandemic, when it was very clear that Pierre had absolutely. I think his exact line was, "COVID will die when it sees me," and he doesn't seem to be wrong. I'm not calling that bluff. Pierre does not seem to be afraid of anything, and the fact that he hit wind shear that was enough to terrify him, that must have been an absolutely terrifying experience. This is both.
Yeah, so they had to redirect to Dallas.
I don't think he redirected. I think that because my read on the story was he decided that I'm never flying to Houston again, and then he later went to Dallas. Somehow he does end up in Dallas and invests in Convex Computer Company.
Convex, yeah.
Not quite the win that Compaq was.
No, not quite Compaq.
Not quite Compaq.
But I mean, kudos to Ben Rosen, because that was, I mean, even though we think about $2.1 million in $1982, That was a big check.
That was a big check. So, Steve, describe who Ben Rosen is. So, for folks who have not seen the documentary.
Yeah, so he was the venture capitalist who wrote the first check in Compaq and really got Compaq off the ground. He ended up chairing the board for 20 years. He was on the board for a long run, and he's invested in SGI, like early check in SGI, invested in EA. In some circles is considered kind of the founding venture capital, and but from his seat, that was a pretty risky venture. But obviously, he had a ton of foresight and saw what was changing on the horizon, and but they, I think their business plan, they had said something preposterous like, we're going to do $30 million in sales in the first year. Which he laughed at, of course, like, well, that's totally ludicrous, but I think there's an opportunity here to potentially build a big company. And the fact that they went on to do over $100 million in the first year is just amazing.
And they hit it. And Adam, I think you really outlined that kind of the trifecta that they hit in terms of like their timing was right. They were clearly, the way they did the company was right. And they just executed really, really well.
I mean, even just to go, even if the market was there to go from 0 to 50,000 units of almost anything in the time span they did is incredible. And just the way that they scaled that team, again, from like 3 dudes who, I mean, I know that they played it up in the documentary, but who considered starting a Mexican restaurant as an alternative. Like those 3 dudes to like an empire of people, like, all working to that goal is just incredible.
But the odds of them doing what they did in the PC space, just about the same as taking over like a chain that runs all Mexican food across the U.S. in a year. So like, who's to say?
There we go. Could have been something, right?
So the thing I think is interesting is like, why did Compaq succeed when others did not? And I clearly like we're reading their version of events. So, but I think it comports with at least my childhood inference of events in terms of like they really focused on the compatibility and on making sure, because all of these PCs were all slightly different, and for reasons that we can all easily understand, because the PC wasn't very well specified. It was kind of it was a lark by IBM. They were going to sell 10,000 units, and all of a sudden that explodes, and you've got very thin system software, and all of this software making implicit dependencies on effectively the machine architecture, and they were hellbent on making it compatible, and that was something customers wanted.
Brian, this may be a bridge too far, but to me it struck me as some of the like first system software, as I think of it, like as that compatibility layer, whereas everything else was sort of the Wild West, and this was now a retrofitting foundation, creating this foundation where previously like everyone had just been divergent.
Well, no, I don't think you're going too far at all. In fact, I came to view this as like original sin in that, on the one hand, it was amazing that they were delivering this compatibility. On the other hand, they were doing it by delivering this very low-level hidden system software in terms of like the BIOS and so on. And then also having to work with the one thing, do they talk about in the documentary the fact that they were floating patches back to Microsoft, or is that from the book?
That's from the book, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. So basically, they were more compatible with Windows than Windows was. And
well, they were more compatible with IBM than IBM was.
They were more compatible with IBM than IBM was.
Yeah.
So Tom, I know Tom Lyon is here. Tom has been joining us every week, which has been great. Tom, I don't know if you're in a position where you can unmute yourself. I would love to get your take on the rise of Compaq as someone who was at Sun at the time, in kind of a different space, but kind of seeing this from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I have to admit, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it at the time. We were pretty busy at Sun, but certainly we were aware something was happening there. But the thing that really put him on the map was having the portable when nobody else did, and being 100% compatible. So it was strongly differentiated and still really useful. So.
Yeah, and so my kind of burning question is, which of those is the more important feature? Steve, I don't know if that's what you're going to say.
Yeah. I have a guess.
I think they go hand in hand because one without the other wouldn't get you very far.
Yeah, I don't know. They went to the. I don't know. I mean those portables were so. I mean, I did know. I knew friends whose parents were attorneys that would use them, but they were, I mean, barely luggable. They were huge.
Well, I think you can't have you can't. Sorry, Adam, but
no, please, Steve.
You can't have, like, the portability is valueless without the compatibility. And yes, I mean, Tom, to your point, it's like you can't have one without the other. I do wonder if 100% compatible but not portable would have presented a competitive product that people would have considered. And I mean, obviously, the combination of the two knocked it out of the park. But
I think if they started that way, they'd be competing purely on price,
right,
which would not get the enterprise's attention very well.
Yeah, because I have the same bias as you in terms of the compatibility being more important, but it's so hard to remember back to a time when there was no network, right? So like being able to pick up your computer and take it to a place was your network, and was your kind of interoperability story in it to a degree. So it's so hard to separate that.
Yeah,
I did appreciate they were talking about, it was so. No one considered the idea that you're going to carry around effectively what is a sewing machine, and so people are walking down the aisles in planes, just cracking people on the back of the head by accident while they're lugging around their computer. Was pretty hilarious. But I think one thing on the compatibility that was really interesting was the training aspect. And I originally was thinking about it in terms of, well, yeah, users are not going to want to have to get retrained on a whole new body of software. But I think one of the things that might have been an even bigger catalyst for their success was the channel.
Yeah.
All the sales and folks that that didn't have to get retrained on the pitch for this new computer and were able to pick it up and go. So they talked about, the dealers loved the idea of having another SKU on the list, and they didn't have to retrain or have specialists that were selling these things.
Yeah, especially in a market where it was this cacophony of different, clone PC vendors. So it made it an easy choice probably for these VARs looking to both differentiate and maintain that compatibility.
Well, the amazing thing to me is that it took a long time for people to figure out the compatibility was really important. You look at Deck Rainbow and the Sun 386i, they were 3-4 years after that, and they still weren't compatible.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's Tom. It goes to your point too that you need both the compatibility and the portability. And Steve, in terms of like the channel, because that portability was kind of what was interesting to the channel. It's like this is something different. It's differentiated, and I'm only going to really feature kind of three companies really prominently, and Compaq kind of fighting to get into that third spot. It's amazing to think of and this is something I think it is totally from a bygone era where a retail channel, an in-person retail channel, is so dominant. I mean, it is like today being like, no, you won't be able to buy Google AdWords. Google AdWords is only going to sell to 3 different companies, and the rest of you just can't actually buy AdWords. So you have no chance if you're not in those 3, basically.
Hey, Tom, I wonder when you talk about how long it took for people to pick up on the importance of compatibility, and also as you mentioned earlier, they weren't really on Sun's radar, rightly so. How much of them being off the radar and compatibility get pulled into this notion of the clones? Kind of like this whole group of copycat companies that basically just copied everything, and that got lumped in together and kind of stayed off people's radar.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see any kind of long-term differentiation. So why would the second or third or fourth company do that make any money? But there's Dell, there's Gateway, there's lots of people who do pretty well.
I've got an idea about this, the compatibility side of it. Dad used to bring home the luggables so I could play Space Invaders, and he would work on spreadsheets. And he could plug it into the printer at work, but he could also plug it into the printer at home that we had other times used for a Commodore. At least I think that was the case. So like he was able to print either place. So he could physically lug it and then plug it into many different kinds of printers. So you could still print in lots of different places. So it's kind of
Yeah, interesting. So Jeff, you grew up with one of these around the house. You had an old compact portable.
yeah, the luggable. He would bring it home, and then you know he'd get it until about 8 or so, and then I would take over and play Space Invaders for an hour or two.
That's awesome. And on that amber monitor, I assume. I mean that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that amber color still like speaks to me in a very that speaks to the animal brain. I will obey the amber color.
and the coiled cord for the keyboard.
Oh, that's right. Oh, because it had that little like gutter that went in, and
yeah.
And those keyboards. I mean, of course, like these keyboards are all worth far more than the machines were ever worth. But those keyboards were so robust.
Yeah, kids playing on them, you know.
What was the name of the?
I want to point out that there were portable solutions before compact, but for time sharing. So you had the Silent 700 in the 70s, where you could tote that home and plug it into the modem.
The Silent 700. Okay.
Yeah, TI.
Okay.
Thermal printer.
Is this for the? I've got so many questions about the Silent 700. Aside from a very poor marketing department, I would have to say. I don't know. I feel like, but so the Silent 700 is a TI machine, you said?
Right. A terminal, portable thermal printing terminal.
This is awesome, Brian. It's got an acoustic coupler built in. Amazing.
It's got an acoustic coupler and it's got a built-in printer. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, it has no CRT. It's just a printing terminal.
Oh, wow.
It's like a half step away from a telegraph. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a typewrite.
It's your teletype 15 years later.
So it wasn't really silent then if it was printing basically the entire time.
Well, it was thermal, so it was not noisy. It was like kind of high pitched.
I just love the fact that like what consumers want is not a screen, but actually silence, please. That is actually what I demand in my. That's amazing. So that's in the 70s, Tom.
Yeah, I used to take one home from Handball and dial in.
That was work from home on and that's at like 300 baud, I assume.
I think it was 12.
Oh, there you go. Speedy.
What was the name? What was the name of the device that came right before theirs that they were looking at as it was the first luggable? Right? It sounds like not the first, but I mean I'm trying to remember the name of the company that launched that had the only portable or luggable.
Wasn't it?
Osborne. There you go.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
And then they killed themselves with the famous Osborne effect.
What was the Osborne effect?
What was the Osborne effect?
Pre-announcing the next machine.
That's right.
So
he gets on stage and says,
sell the current one.
He says, if you love the Osborne 1, just wait till the Osborne 2.
It's like, I will.
I will.
So they did. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I'm a little disappointed that my entire management chain doesn't know that, but now they do. So that's good.
It's like, did I early exercise? Shit.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I've been hyping up the Oxide 2.
Yeah, I've been talking the Oxide 2 like all week. Like forget the Oxide 1.
The 2.
Please.
Wait for the 3.
The 2. Exactly.
The again, like state of the art for its time, but the screen to rest of machine ratio on that thing was astounding. I think it was like a 2 by 2 inch screen. Just how anyone could see anything on it was amazing.
Yeah, so Jeff,
that's sorry, I was going to say.
Yeah,
that's kind of like the Commodore 64 Executive Edition, the Commodore's luggable, where there was a tiny little screen, maybe 3 inches by 3 inch, and then there was a split. They were supposed to put 2 floppy drives into it, but they only had enough power for one, so they left the other as kind of like a empty space.
It's brutal.
And when did K-Pro, I assume is purely post, are they mimicking compact? I mean, I had a math teacher with a K-Pro with the dual floppies. I don't think I had a hard drive in it, but it was basically, it looked like a military surplus compact. Remember K-Pro, Tom? No.
I remember the name, but not
the actual machine. So the another thing that kind of, I know Steve grabbed you, and I definitely found very surprising about just the history of Compaq was the different organizational approach that they had. That I did not know the first thing about. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, But then when, in watching Silicon Cowboys, I think it was very interesting, but it was telling early on when they were talking about, before even thinking about what to go do, the kind of company they wanted to build. And the fact that they were focused on that first, coming out of TI, and just seeing kind of these large bureaucratic top-down decision making and type of organizational structure that they suffered under, and wanting to create something where you had folks that felt like they had a real say in what was going to happen, and focused on teamwork and focused on having everyone highly invested in their work. I think that was what, both in the organizational structure they created, but then in just the quality of product that they were producing, played a large role in it, which was fascinating.
Fascinating and ahead of its time, honestly. I mean, I think it was it felt very modern. It felt, in fact, it almost felt almost iconoclastic today, sadly, let alone in 1983.
Well, they made a big deal about coffee and free soda, which
free Cokes.
I was watching another documentary about Fairchild Semiconductor. It's a PBS American Experience.
Ooh.
And they also had a very egalitarian, company culture, at least what they could control on the West Coast, and then the East Coast people tried to manage it to death. So it was very interesting.
That is really interesting, and of course, Fairchild is really the right at the birth of Silicon Valley, with the traders leaving Shockley Semiconductor and forming Fairchild. And so it's interesting to kind of that kind of Silicon Valley foundation now spreading its way to Texas, with what must have been very, I got to assume, out of step with Texan companies at the time. Certainly from the Compaq employees they interviewed, it sounded like it was unusual, and people felt valued. They felt listened to.
I think part of the documentary talks about how unhappy they were at TI at the rigid structure.
TI does come up a couple of times. Yeah.
Ultimately, the Fairchild East Coast people took over, and then that caused all these other companies to be started out of Fairchild.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, certainly anyone's going to stand in stark contrast to IBM in those days. I mean, I think they were innovative in their organizational structure, but I mean, you had the IBM VP of marketing in his tennis whites at a country club doing his interview. With his Ferrari getting polished in the background. It's like, all right, it's not too far of a jump to go egalitarian compared to IBM at that time.
Right. There's some room to actually improve on this without going onto the kibbutz. We've actually got there's a way station here that we can hit pretty easily.
That's right.
Well, and the thing is, we, for those of you who haven't seen, we at Oxide ask people when they apply to Oxide when they've been most unhappiest in their careers, and it all boils down to people not feeling listened to ultimately, but not having kind of agency. And I thought it was interesting that this is a very timeless idea, a very timeless problem, clearly, because Compaq employees really liked the fact that they could actually suggest improvements to Compaq, and they wouldn't always do them, but they'd be listened to, and that's important.
Well, and the CEO was sort of walking around the office and very accessible, and I think also probably innovative for its time.
Yeah, that's the old HP management by walking around, and that kind of accessibility. Again, feels like it's, as Steve, as you point out, it feels like it's kind of a low bar to clear there with the Ferrari and the country club.
But they did. I mean, I think what it spoke to was, later you hear in the documentary how they talk about the only way they would have really been able to compete with IBM is, yes, compatibility was important, but quality was even more important. Because the quality of the system had to knock it out of the park from the very beginning and kind of hold those first 3 years, or else they weren't going to consider it an acceptable alternative to IBM. And I think that quality was born out of, all the folks being as bought in as they were, feeling they had agency, really, putting all their blood, sweat, and tears into the product, and it showed. So it was definitely a good culture they created.
Okay, then, so how much of Compaq's success is also just pure misexecution from IBM? Because IBM kind of inadvertently creates this open architecture, pseudo-open architecture, and makes exactly the wrong move in trying to reproprietarize it with the PS2 and the microchannel architecture, which is an absolute disaster. I feel like IBM, I mean, in many ways, the story of Compaq is as much the story of the failed PS2. I don't know. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, that was one I definitely wanted to ask you about, Brian, because it seemed like they really shot themselves, like took very careful aim and then shot themselves in their foot.
Oh, yes.
On this, on the microchannel architecture, which both kind of was intended to lock people in, but with very little carrot to go along with that stick.
There's no carrot, all stick.
Right. While also invalidating compatibility. So it was. I mean, I guess we've seen these kind of decisions made, but it was such a misexecution to do this analysis of the market and say, we need to grab our existing customers and lock them in before they slip through our fingers, and in doing so, just hasten their departure. And I think we've sort of seen this play several times in the industry, but it was just remarkable. And Compaq was in the right spot to pick up the pieces.
Well, and yeah, I remember vividly the so-called bus wars, which were happening. I want to say this is like 86, 87. And I remember being like a sixth grader and reading like the Byte magazine, issue on the bus wars between, ISA versus MCA versus ISA, which was what the extended industry standard architecture, which like Compaq was championing. And I remember thinking like, I'm just a kid, but why would anyone use microchannel? This looks like it sucks. I mean, there was nothing to be said for it. They weren't even like, other than it was IBM.
Now, do I have this right that Compaq retroactively, through this like consortium of the other PC vendors, took IBM's bus architecture and rechristened it the industry standard? I mean, it's sort of a brilliant like backwards fuck you, right? To take the thing that you are trying to distance yourself from and bless it as a standard, which now it makes you look like you're walking away from.
So in small defense of microchannel, the whole ISA and ISA and this was a technical mess. It still is. It lives on today inside your servers.
It is a technical mess. So yeah, and MCA was an attempt to do a cleaner sheet of paper. But so, Tom, did you do any microchannel implementation? Maybe you can speak to it with more technical depth than. Certainly, I never had to deal with it from an implementation perspective because MCA was dead by the time I actually. So MCA was dead, and I'm not sure if I have to do the story. So we were supporting ISA devices in the operating system for a long time. So when I showed up at Sun in 1996, we still supported ISA devices in Solaris x86. And I was giving I was asked the kind of the lead engineer on Solaris, was it 7? No, not me. No, that's me. Excuse me. It would have been, what would it was it 2.6? Andy Tucker put me up to give this presentation on what's new in Solaris x86 because he couldn't make it, which it turns out was not the full story. The full story was we were ripping out a bunch of ISA and ISA drivers, and this was to the like ISA driver group inside of Sun that I had no idea.
You're like, Brian, I'm a sacrificial sheep. I can't possibly go. You are a sacrificial lamb.
Yes, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what it was. And it was to the Solaris x86 Evangelists. I think is what that was, the group inside of Sun. I don't know where I am. I'm in Cupertino. I'm presenting to a bunch of like Sun folks. And then usually when you get to the part of the what's new in the operating system where you are ripping stuff out, like that goes super fast because it's a bunch of stuff that nobody's using and nobody cares about. So here's a bunch of stuff that you didn't care about or you probably weren't using and we've been telling you for 2 years not to use and now it's gone. But man, I got to that ISA slide and it was absolute bedlam. All of a sudden, people are shouting at me. Because I am the messenger. Like, why not kill the messenger? At least if you're not going to kill the messenger, at least send back a severed finger or something. So it was anyway. So this is like my exposure to the ISA device drivers. As I always get kind of like this little fight or flight Twitch reaction because it takes me right back to a conference room as like a 23-year-old wondering like, what the fuck's Andy Tucker just put me up to?
Well, the thing people don't appreciate today is how many millions of different ISO boards there were for this and the other. I mean, more than the number of USB peripherals today. I mean, the I/O has gotten a lot more homogeneous.
Well, yeah, I mean, Tom, that's a very good point because this is a time when the machines themselves are anemic. So if you want any functionality in the machine, you are going to a third party, to a company that is having its own growth trajectory. You're going to AdLib or Sound Blaster or Creative Labs. You're going to,
To be clear, I mean, you're talking about so anemic that you're talking about features like producing sound.
Right.
Producing the. Do you know what? I know Jeff is with me on this.
I know. I'm emphasizing
those
that
machines
point
could
that like
beep. That's all they could do was beep.
I know. That's what I'm emphasizing that point, Brian.
They could beep. That's it.
There were magazines filled with deciding which sound generating card one would buy.
Yes.
And there's the Hercules card that was wildly popular.
The Hercules card. Now there we go. Hercules. That is the. All I wanted was I had an Amdec monochrome monitor that I absolutely loved. I had an IBM PCXT without a graphics card. Sorry, this is turning into a therapy session. But all I wanted was that Hercules monochrome adapter, and it was like $529, and I was never going to get it. So that's it. And definitely like a sound card. I mean, it's like, man, if you're an Xer of my vintage, like the first time you heard an AdLib or a Sound Blaster was like, I have seen the future. Like, I don't even want moon bases anymore. I don't want hover cars. Like, just like
I'm here.
I've arrived, and no, it was amazing.
But then part of the compatibility thing was that if you told someone that their ISA card was not going to work anymore, you could be putting thousands of people out of business. It's ridiculous.
Right. So, Tom, you told us a great story about a token ring driver that you wrote for the IBM token ring. Was that token ring? Was that microchannel, or was that what was the?
That was ISA. Remember, part of that story was Howard Frazier, one of the hardware guys, also did a weekend VME to ISA bus adapter, and so we could run token ring in one of the big VME boards in the sun. I actually had it running on Spark.
I had definitely forgotten that detail or didn't fully absorb it at the time, that you had an ISA to VME adapter, and then you're running the token ring, writing the token ring card, a token ring driver on top of it. That is amazing. So so you guys are using VME at the time, and this is before S-Bus.
Right.
What's the sun view of what's going on in the PC space? I assume it's just like, good Lord, what a mess that is.
Yeah, it was just, good Lord, what a mess. I mean,
right.
The ISA bus was never mechanically very well thought out, or thermally, or any of those things. VME was a lot better.
Right.
But and then S-Bus had some of the plug-and-play features that PCI had.
Right. And so for those who are, in terms of the history of I/O buses, PCI is where these two kind of families, where you get the kind of S-Bus VME, the much better thought out, frankly, architectures begin to feed back into the PC. And with PCI, we actually get and start building PCI. Everyone starts building PCI-based machines, in like 2000 and early 2000s, right, Tom?
I would have guessed late 90s.
Or even late 90s, yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, it was a huge improvement.
Somewhere in the middle there was those Visa local bus, the VLB ones that were so weird.
Okay, where was this? Where was the VLB, Jeff? Where was that?
Visa local bus. That was. It seemed like it was like after ISA. It was kind of like at the EISA time. It was like you could get a video card that was one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean the ISA bus was too slow, and people started putting stuff on the processor bus essentially, where it talked to memory or the memory controller, and that was the Visa local bus that they standardized.
So the cards were long, and they had a normal, I think it was like an ISA connector, and then farther along they had the VLB the extra connector, which I just remember having like a brown plug on the motherboard. And
so for what machine was that?
this was for PCs, various PCs, the clones, and you would use it for video cards.
Got it. Okay, so mainly video.
Yeah.
Well, later on, Intel had a bastardized version of PCI X, AGP. Remember AGP? It was graphics only.
Yeah.
So same kind of idea. It's like, here's a kludge for graphics, but we don't want you to use it for anything else.
Okay, so speaking of Intel, a big part of the Compaq story is what happens with the 386, where the first 386-based machine is introduced not by IBM but by Compaq, which is pretty nuts considering that the rise of x86 had happened with IBM. For them to short, and it just reminds me of IBM, just like classic arrogance, where IBM clearly thought Intel would never have some clone manufacturer give them the first rights to the 386. I thought that's an amazing part of the story. What did you guys think?
Oh. Yeah, they went from fast follower to innovator. And
well, I think too, someone in IBM decided that 32 bits was too much and 16 was good enough, because they had that strategy with OS2 as well, where everything had to be 16-bit and 32-bit.
Okay, I do not think I realized this about OS2. OS2 was trying to be, everything was both 16 and 32-bit?
Yeah, everything had to run on the 286.
Oh, right. That's brutal.
So I think someone in IBM decided 32 bits, no, that's mainframe territory. It can't go there.
Do you think that that's actually the calculus? That people thought if that is, it would be very prescient. That's because that's exactly what ultimately happened. It just took 20 years to happen.
I don't know.
Yes, well, I was surprised. I mean, I guess I knew that, and I should also say that just for folks that are like, don't hesitate to hop in here, raise your hand. We call on anyone that raises their hand around here. So just hop in if you got questions or comments, or if you use one of these machines, or if you saw the documentary and had thoughts about it.
But to the question of whether IBM would have, whether they basically created their own demise or not in this space, I think one of the other headwinds that was going to work against them eventually is that all the software companies, it was in their best interest to have the clones effectively become real companies. Like Lotus and Microsoft, I mean, everyone was interested in getting better distribution across more PC companies at the time. So I think that would have chipped away at it, even if IBM had not, again, shot themselves in the foot.
In other words, it's in the software industry's best interest. I mean, certainly Microsoft aided the rise of Compaq, no question. But Compaq turned Microsoft into a real believer. Clearly won like the Microsoft hearts and minds, which you're right, because you're not going to have a software industry. I mean, I remember having to buy software, and they would say IBM PC and 100% compatible. So it's like compatibility was a major issue in software vendors.
I do have to say I loved the 80s ads. 80s and 90s ads. There was some just great marketing.
The John Cleese ones, I was really surprised. I had no idea that John Cleese was the spokesman for Compaq for so many years. It was awesome.
How do you not know that?
And then in stark contrast that the IBM ones were like featuring Charlie Chaplin or like lookalikes. I don't know. You're like, well, now you're just doing it to yourselves, guys.
Okay, so
introducing their new innovative technologies with someone from the 20s and 30s.
Okay,
that's right.
So, as someone who really grew, I mean, I knew, like, absolutely no joke, I knew Charlie Chaplin first as an association through the IBM PC rather than through the. So, I didn't even know that they were making a reference to. I mean, and in hindsight, it is. I mean, I guess I kind of like hadn't even really thought about it as an adult. But Jesus Christ, as an adult, what are you doing, IBM? Why are you making Charlie Chaplin? How does it, like, what was the logic for that? Can someone walk me through what their rationale would be for Charlie Chaplin?
Hey, listen, you guys need to stop mocking the Charlie Chaplin ads. No, seriously, those were marketing gold. And as like a 5-year-old kid watching, Bunny Rabbit Ear TV and the ads in the middle of Scooby-Doo, with Charlie Chaplin. I was begging my parents for an IBM PC.
I feel the same way, Dan. Look, I feel the same way. I mean, they are. I think of them as. I mean, again, I didn't know that they were making reference to a movie character. I thought they had just invented this own and Dan, it was almost like a Mr. Bean feel to it. Like this character they created was kind of cartoonish, and
this IBM character.
And no, I agree. Like, look, I'm not denigrating it exactly. I'm just now, as an adult, trying to put it all together, and I'm very confused about why.
Well, in their words, it absolutely bombed on their target audience. So
well, it worked on Dan and Dave. I mean, it worked on,
True.
And,
well, did your parents buy you the thing?
Well, I was extremely unusual in that I was the only kid I knew in 1983 who had an IBM PC XT. So because there was an ill-formed thought in my father's brain that he was going to start a software company. That did not go well. But he did spend he definitely spent the family inheritance or whatever on a computer that had no graphics card after all this. So
it worked. You were one of the 750,000.
I was.
I think that was the first year when they were talking about Compaq, just crushing it and selling 55,000 PCs. And then they paused and they said, and in the same year, IBM sold 750,000.
Well,
they were just such a monster.
And I learned to program with I'm not sure if you call it the basic primer or the basic primer, but that was, Charlie Chaplin sold that to me, basically, is how I view it. I mean, that is so, just in terms of that. And it clearly, Dan, it had the same impact for you, clearly. I mean, those ads, they were, but I just don't know from an adult perspective what an adult mind. Dan, do you recall having a conversation with your parents and using Charlie Chaplin as an argument?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and they were not convinced. And we didn't get a computer until 1985, and then we brought in a Macintosh. So,
you're one of those families. You were were you the kid with the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier too? I feel like there's a lot of overlap between the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier exactly and the Macintosh. I mean, no, listen, I'm not making that. Just devoted parents, but the.
Hey, settle down. Like, this isn't some class warfare thing.
Look who's a Mac family. Look who's a Mac family, everybody.
So this takes you back in a lot of different ways. My parents got a free Mac Plus when they opened a bank account.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
What bank is this? It's like Chase Private Reserve or whatever?
This was like Fleet Bank. I don't know. I know that it's like crazy anachronistic to think that like banks would have these giveaways, but maybe they had some minimum balance. I don't know.
Adam, I know that you are telling the truth.
I've heard of giving away toasters.
Do you know? I've confirmed this over the years.
Okay,
so
that's what I want to ask.
Lie,
have you gone back? Meanwhile, your parents are like, shit, he still remembers that one. Like, we fed him that line to prevent us from ever having to buy an upgrade or think about a computer again, and he is like holding on to that one. Like, it's like just stand by it. He'll forget it.
I just want to point out one thing. Like the savings and loan sort of thing happened right around this time. So if we want to talk about,
that's true. Yeah,
the fiduciary responsibility.
Lesser known facts of the savings and loan scandal.
Yeah, when my parents opened an account at Silverado Savings and Loan, we got a free Amdahl mainframe. Like, didn't everybody at the time? You're right.
I mean, this is the time when we had 10% interest rates.
It is it is true. It's a very different era. So you got a free Mac Plus. Now, with this, what year is this?
Car.
So our first Mac Plus we got in 1986.
That is
and then
early,
that
though.
one.
Wow.
That was pretty early, especially because my folks were not computer professionals. Continue to emphatically.
Did they open the account because of the free Mac Plus?
The first one they bought, they got another Mac Plus that they were using for work in 1988. So I was stretching it a little bit, but that one they got for the bank account.
Okay.
And I don't know if how much of a motivating factor that was.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it was. All right, so 88. That's a little bit, because I feel like 86. I feel the Macs were still very
86. We had a Commodore 64 and then upgraded to a Mac Plus.
Yeah, that's a big upgrade.
It was a big upgrade. It was incredible. It was incredible.
And how much time did you spend just on Mac Paint? Adam, you first, Dan, then you.
Well, I mean,
of 90%, 95%, and 99% of that
So-
machine being up.
yeah. So 100% of my time, obviously, and then, but the one I will always remember is the Image Writer 2 was the printer that came with it that
Right.
had the perforated edges, and like Banner Maker 2 or something like that, where you could print Happy Birthday or probably other messages, but it never came up, and like have all the different pieces of paper hooked together and just not separate the perforation. I think that was something that we're really missing from our modern printers.
You are bringing me back to Print Shop in
Print Shop,
remember
right.
Print Shop, the program Print Shop?
Yes.
And you would, you'd be printing out something that would be like, you got the dot matrix, and you're
Exactly.
printing out some galactic banner that's only going to take you 3.5 days to print.
That's right.
Hey guys, the Berkeley Banner program, it's still in Linux.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to find the right printer.
Well, Tom, Print Shop was a PC, and apparently I think Mac too, maybe, Adam? I'm not sure if it was on the Mac or not. Yeah. That allowed you to, certainly it was my first experience with like fonts, was Print Shop. You're like, there's a Western font? it was exhilarating at the time.
Well, it wasn't just banners. You could do like greeting cards.
Right.
All sorts of other stuff.
Right. You bring me back to playing like Rocky's Boots.
So intersecting though, so from the documentary from Silicon Cowboys, I don't know if this stuck out for you folks, and this is intersecting with like the Apple talk, but they ended with saying, hey, if Compaq made an iPhone, it would have worked better. Did you guys catch this one?
Yes, and I have to say this is all over the book too.
Oh.
And it's like I think it cheapens the whole thing. It's like no one should feel an obligation to claim their role in history by connecting themselves to the iPhone or by claiming that if they hadn't existed, the iPhone wouldn't happen. It's like the iPhone is not the pinnacle of human history, and we
also say that you would have done it better.
iPhone would have been rotary compatible.
Tom, well played.
Compaq made a CDA, so it's like.
Yeah, I just do not feel that. I mean, the book, like I said, tries to make this connection a lot, and I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to in terms of like this desperation to be part of the deep history of the iPhone.
Yeah, there was just this one. One of the talking head interviews towards the end was just talking about how, sort of the fundamentals of the technology, and then how the execution would have been better. And just like, okay, enough. Just take your wins.
Absolutely.
You can't claim. I mean, and there are many of them, right? And ultimately, sort of ending in tears. But just like for the time that they were dominant, just that's the story. But then, I mean, I think that I saw enough both success and radiated hubris from my time at Sun, where you say, there was a time when Sun was in serious talks to acquire Apple. And I think, Brian, you had the great line that we would have ended up with like the Mac OS 9 kernel running CDE
right.
as our desktop.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a much more likely outcome than like the Solaris kernel underpinning Mac OS.
Yeah, I feel it was a fair bet that we would take the worst of all companies on any acquisition.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're not going to go broke on that bet, that any acquisition will be bungled and we will take the absolute worst of both. Yes. Well, so, and it is.
Speaking of acquisitions,
yes.
Though, the later history of Compaq.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I was going to get there too, because I think we got to talk. Unfortunately, the movie ends when Canyon is fired. Which is pretty crazy, by Rosen, right? Which is pretty amazing. And Steve, did that send a chill up your spine at all? Just out of curiosity, as the CEO of a computer company.
What are you talking about? None of that.
No, right, exactly.
But I didn't know. But yeah, I think Tom, I don't know which acquisition you were thinking about, but I did not know they acquired Tandem. Didn't know they acquired Deck. I mean, I knew they acquired Deck, but didn't really follow kind of where that went.
Yeah, so I guess the Deck was more personal to me because Sun kind of killed Deck, and then Compaq bought him.
And that was not a good acquisition. That was not a smart acquisition.
Be fair here. I mean, Deck killed Deck.
Deck killed Deck.
Well, they got open VMS out of it. Right? So.
And Deck definitely killed Deck. Deck had way too many people at Deck to support that kind of revenue, and just did not. it's a mystery to me why Compaq ultimately. But I mean, Tandem makes maybe a little bit more sense. But I also don't think Eckhart Pfeiffer, I don't think is impressive, and they didn't really make him out to be a villain in the movie. But like, why not? Like, can't we actually? I don't know. I felt that like the later history of Compaq is this kind of sugar high of sales continuing to spike, but then ultimately it's the ruin of the company, and the company ultimately ceases to become an innovator. And I feel it's like I mean, I don't know, Tom, what your take is, but my view on Compaq is like the last real innovations are around the blade systems, which Compaq more or less pioneered. I mean, they were making good machines in the mid '90s, but I think that was still honestly a holdover from when Canyon was there. And then by the time, he's totally out, I feel the quality kind of plummets. And
yeah, I think management was out of touch with reality.
yes,
the engineers continued to crank out good x86 stuff and really saved HP's ass after HP bought them.
And Steve, you were at Dell. Do you recall kind of competing with Compaq HP during, or was it? Oh, had they merged at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically the server line at HP was still at its core Compaq systems and very high quality. That's kind of where the quality came from. I did appreciate a few call outs at the end there on some of back to marketing. Dell, I thought, had some pretty creative ads, which I know Sun then had even further creative ads taking Dell's knees out later. But they had a frame up of, on the left, a Dell system that was appealing, and then on the right, it was a Compaq system that was appalling, and comparing the prices of the two. And then they had, because Compaq now at this point these systems were very, very expensive.
Yes.
And this was part of the controversy of Rod getting run out, was not wanting to go down market. But then they had top of the mark was the Dell system on the left, and then top of the markup was Compaq on the right.
So what I remember, Steve, from that era, Dell had, I thought, very good ads in that era. What I remember
and
was
then Sun had yes.
No.
Well.
I was not going to be Sun centric. You don't have to be so twitchy. I remember Dell's ad, the Great Texas Chainsaw Laptop Massacre, where they were comparing their prices to Compaq's prices on laptops, and they were just annihilating Compaq on price. I mean, it was where you were getting like, it wasn't clear what the quality difference was, honestly, at that point between a Dell and a Compaq.
Well, there was one point in the 90s, I think, when Compaq was taking in the shorts, and they restructured the company to go low margin, and it was a very impressive maneuver that they survived that, and they took on Dell much more competitively.
So the Sun ad that I was particularly sensitive towards was, so we had a line of servers, the 2800 series that was, or 2700 series that was a 2U server and was just very, very hot. I mean, it ran hot, ran so hot, created a couple fires in data centers, which is always a good look. And Sun's marketing team pounced right on that and started running a series of ad campaigns, which would have, Hades in the background and the Dell logo with horns coming out of it. And it would say, boy, it's getting hotter than Dell in here. And just a bunch of like hotter and Dell and hell references that, very effective campaign. Took the, rather than the empathy today you'll see of like cloud infrastructure providers where someone has a data center fire and everyone's like, oh God,
like hug ups,
like
hashtag hug ups.
I feel for them. Yeah.
Right.
Hug ups. God, I never want, we all know what that feels like. I mean, Sun was just like,
burn,
no!
baby, burn.
Just kneecapped Dell. Right. And we were losing customers left, right, and
well,
center.
The one I remember, so first of all, I don't think anyone at Sun Marketing would have even fantasized about hitting the mark so much inside of Dell. I think we kind of assumed that Dell was ignoring those ads, but it was clearly not. Clearly, they, at least somewhere inside of Dell, they were resonating. I remember the University of Buffalo bought a bunch of Dell systems, tried to power them on, and had so much draw that they browned out the city. Was the anyway? That's what they told us in the kind of the Pravda issue inside of Sun. I don't even actually know if it was true or not. So it's like, this is the anti-Dell propaganda that Adam and I grew up on. So for all I know, it's just exactly that.
They
Yeah.
also told us we had revenue. So
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, they were telling us all sorts of myths. But I'm not sure that those ads were that effective, Steve. Do you think? I mean,
They were. Yeah, they were. The whole rhyme, I can tell you, the rhymes with hell just stuck and was, it just was a good way for people to remember that Dell servers are, have a high likelihood of catching fire in your data center. And it was pretty effective.
You ended up on the coalface of that one, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yep.
So speaking
yeah.
of HPE and Compaq, they just relocated their headquarters to Houston. So that's really a continuation of the Compaq.
Interesting.
Yes.
That feels like that is a more appropriate place for them. I mean, I don't feel that they have been really a Silicon Valley company for a long, long, long time. I mean, I feel like HP has sadly at a pretty deep level lost its way. I mean, there are, clearly aspects of the old HP that are still alive. And definitely there's some great engineering inside of HP, but I feel like they are more at this point. Houston may be a better fit. I'm not denigrating Houston. I should make clear, like everyone. Although, actually, speaking of Houston, Adam, do you remember talking to a customer of ours, Enron, who was being wooed by Compaq? Do you remember his tales of being wooed by Compaq?
Oh no, I don't.
And this is this is where kind of like the animals were walking upright, honestly, where Compaq kind of really became like IBM in a lot of their sales tactics. And they were, Steve, it was all the kind of like super high price, taking you to ball games and not talking about technology at all. And,
just ball games.
That's right. Well, a lot.
That's right.
Oh no, it was a lot more than ball games and
extra innings ball games.
Extra innings ball games, exactly.
They have stories about Compaq. I've heard from some sales guys from the German dudes time there.
It was, and meanwhile, the customer that we were dealing with is complaining about the fact that he's got an entire data center that has rebooted, I think, due to a power failure, and it was all waiting for someone to press F1 to continue. So it literally had no way of remote doing it. You have to have someone have a keyboard plugging in all of these servers, so he was very dismayed by it. But I think clearly Compaq's sales motion looked a lot more like an IBM sales motion at the end. I don't know, Steve, if that fits your experience of competing with Compaq or not.
Yeah, I didn't really see. They were selling mostly through the channel, so it was not often that we would run into them directly. But yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all.
But so I think in the New York Times review of Tom, to your earlier point, the New York Times review of this documentary is like, hey, there's another interesting documentary to be done on what happened after Canyon. But I don't know. I think it may be less interesting. I think that this part of the history is actually more interesting. I thought it was an amazing part of the history anyway.
Definitely worth a watch. I mean, it's just over an hour, fast paced. At least speaking for myself, knew very little of Compaq's rise and just how important they were in the history of personal computers. So strongly recommended.
Yeah, absolutely.
Strongly recommended. And I think I'm going to give you another recommendation. I think we're going to end here with another recommendation on Something Ventured, if memory serves, talks about the history of Tandem quite a bit. And the history of Tandem is really interesting and looks, Steve, definitely. I'm
definitely going to watch that because it was. I'm not sure if it was lore or reality because no one made it down to the data center to find out. But the Dell sales organization, everybody operated off of this. It was effectively a green screen, but it was blue and red and yellow themed colors. And this was the Dell Order Management System, DOMS, and they could not rip this out of the hands of the entire field team and the inside team. They kept trying to flip it over to a web UI, and everybody just knew how to do their business off the function keys. And F2 to place an order, F7 to look at shipping details. So this was so hardwired in the sales organization's heads that they would just revolt every time Dell would try and make an IT change, which was effectively to get rid of this $7 million iceberg sitting in the data center, this Tandem that they had. And they were so reliant upon it that they had a Tandem literally shrink wrapped just sitting on the data center floor in the event that first one ever went out. So Tandem has always been in Dell lore, at least from the sales organization's perspective, because of its stranglehold on the Dell field team. But it'd be great to see the history.
The history is really, really interesting. Jimmy Trebek is a super interesting character. I don't know if Tom, did you have any any interaction with Jimmy Trebek at all? I mean, very iconoclastic engineer.
No.
And the thing that I didn't realize is that Tandem made KP. KP, if it weren't for Tandem, Kleiner Perkins would not have risen as a VC firm. They had basically went all in Tandem, and Tandem had an outsized result, and that's why. And they've got extensive interviews with a bunch of the KP folks,
So I should mention that one of my infinite array of brothers works at Tandem, as well as a sister-in-law. So I didn't pay that much attention to it.
I know. I feel like this is right. I know it sounds like, look, it's only like a sibling. So like, if I paid attention to all of the computer companies that all my siblings worked at, like I'd never get anything done. So but that's another good one to watch. So we'll put that one in the show notes. All right. Any closing thoughts? That was Steve. Thanks so much for joining us. Tom, as always. Jeff, Dan, Jason, and Adam. Thanks as always. Any parting words of wisdom, Adam?
Just the building on compatibility, like building system software, building systems hardware. Definitely one of the first instances I've seen. Definitely worth a watch.
Definitely worth a watch. All right. Thanks, everyone. We will see you next Monday. I think we're going to keep doing this. We're having fun. So hopefully you're having fun too. We've recorded this. We'll put the recording out there. We'll put the show notes out there too. And we'll see you next time. Adios.
See ya. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks.